Welcome to Under the Hood Podcast. In this podcast, we pop the hood and give you an inside look at the hows and whys of our ministry here at Cornerstone Church. I'm Michael Nave, your host. It is my pleasure to welcome you back to another episode. And again, we're going to grab the time capsule. I have Nathan Rawls right here in studio with me. So glad you're here today.
It's good to be here.
So a time capsule, why are we doing these? What was our purpose in this?
I think, so as we're going through this 9-month journey, we realize that we're learning a whole lot along the way. And I think one of the great travesties of life is whenever we don't take time to stop and analyze what just happened.
Yes.
It's like so much of life is lived without reflection and without thinking about, lessons learned. And so I think this is one of those times for us to just say, okay, so we just finished teaching on this.
Yes.
What did we love about it? What really locked in? And then what did we learn and say hey, maybe that's not how we want to talk about that, or maybe there's a better way, or maybe there's something missing from this. So this just gives us a chance to kind of push the pause button and do a little bit of introspection.
All right. Challenge accepted. Let's do it. So big picture, follow is a rule of life. We love the Andy Crouch quote, a group of people without a rule of life is not a community. Prophet Amos, how can two walk together unless they be agreed? So this is our agreed rule of life. A full year ago, January 2023, we introduced our church to a set of tools that would help us reflect on these practices and how am I engaging them in our lives. And now we've started this process of walking through each of those practices, not just to do an assessment, how am I doing? Because if we're being really honest with each other, some of us took the question, answered the statements, the questions, the questionnaire, and we're like, oh, crud.
Yeah.
On this one, I kind of suck at this practice. Yeah. And so it's not about taking an assessment to become discouraged. It's taking an assessment to realize where we can grow. And so we're on this journey of introducing all of them. The first 3 oriented to our relationship with God. We'd call that up, worship, hear, and pray. The second 3, which is what we're now into, is focused on our relationship with others. Serve, connect, invite those that are out. And so that's what introduces us to our 4th practice, which is serve. And you and I had a neat conversation recently about recognizing these are actually kind of skills, things you develop and get better at. It's not a practice where you check the box, but we are in these practices, we're developing skills focused on these key relationships.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, so I whenever we're in church world, everybody expects you're going to talk about serving because it's like one of the bigs, right? It's you need to go to church, you need to get on a ministry team, you need to get in a group. And so I was so excited to see us as we're talking about serve, take it outside of the it was not just 4 weeks of promo for hey, get on a ministry team because we need more volunteers.
Yes.
It was a much more fully fledged, holistic view of service, which I thought was just fantastic.
It has really been an enjoyable journey and a challenging journey. Okay, so let's run through them just to recap the serve month. Week 1, we were in Genesis 11 and 12, and what an incredible story. As I shared as we went through it, the Bema Discipleship podcast was really inspiring to me to catch some pieces. But the story is clear. We've heard this story before where Abraham willingly leaves it all, without a doubt, the safety and the family business and his community and all the things that he had, because the Lord said, go and move to the land that I will show you. Yeah. And maybe not only did he take nephew Lot along, which is absolutely clear, but maybe he took niece Sarah along, and maybe Iscah is Sarai, which would mean Abraham knew she was barren. So what an incredible story. What is absolutely clear is Abraham left it all to go serve God.
Yeah. That's just we were talking some last night in one of our institute classes about progressive revelation and God revealing different pieces at different times in history. And so just to see that with the little bit that Abraham knew, like
Yes.
the little bit that he knew, coming from like a pagan background and stuff. Out of nowhere, he hears God say, "Hey, leave it all. I'm going to give you a land. I'm not really going to like. There's no GPS coordinates or whatever. Like, just set out. I'll tell you whenever you get there."
Right.
And for him to say, "Okay," it's like that's really inspiring.
He did, yeah, and as you're hinting at, Joshua would later say, and they worshipped other gods,
Yeah.
and so it's easy to look at a story like that and go, well, wow, if God told me to move, then I would move. Well, hey, there's a lot going on back there, so I appreciate you adding those pieces.
Yeah.
And then we stepped into week 2, which is out of Isaiah 6. What a scene! Oh my goodness, for Isaiah to encounter the Lord in this really special way, to encounter God's holiness in such a way that immediately he was aware of his sinfulness, and then he confesses his sins and living among sinful people and experiences this holy touch from God. And then his answer is yes. Like, he's over there jumping up and down, send me, send me, send me, before the mission is even described. And what an incredible challenge for all of us, just to be willing to be sent by God.
Yeah. And then one of the other like crazy parts about that you called out really well was just like, his ministry, like by all accounts, looks pretty fruitless.
It does.
I mean, it's just like frustrating. And I think of how many times I step into something. It's like, well, I'll give it a shot, but if I don't see some fruit within a couple of weeks or whatever, it's like, then that obviously was not from God. It's like, man, God might call us to do some things that require long-term faithfulness that we might not even see things that feel like fruitfulness.
Right.
That's kind of wild.
Yes, we went through that text. I don't think I'd ever before connected this promise that God had made to Solomon when he anointed the temple, when the dedication, excuse me, I couldn't come up with that word. And then to realize that God had promised them, hey, it's that 2 Chronicles 7:14, if my people will call, and repent, God had promised, I'll keep coming back. And it's just not worked. This cycle of they'd call upon him and here he'd come. And then they fell right back into that same horrible cycle and pattern. And to see that maybe God was indicating, hey, I'm done.
Yeah.
We're not going to keep doing this anymore, as it was a step closer and closer to the cross.
Yeah.
But his ministry, that was not a fun ministry to be given. And what a challenge for us, as you said, if we're in one of those seasons, not seeing what we'd hope to see out of a ministry. If God's called you to it, stick to it, man. Keep at it. Which then takes us to week 3, where we jumped over into the New Testament, Matthew 25, these genuine sheep who have served the least of these. And Jesus says, thank you for serving me. And they're like, when did we serve you? And Jesus said, when you did it for the least of these, you did it for me. What an incredible reminder of when we are serving it. We do it out of our relationship with Jesus. We do it for Jesus. In everything you do it as unto the Lord. And that is especially true of serving.
Yeah. On that one, like a standout point for me was, and I've just been paying attention to this a lot, like the priority that's placed on serving people within your church community.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know. I think I've read that, whatever you did for the least of these, and generally just assumed that it's just charity, carte blanche. It's just charity. Like that's why you should be doing all these charitable causes and stuff. It's like, it's not wrong that it should be spilling out over into our communities and stuff, the way we serve.
Yes.
But like placing an intentional priority on the family of God, I think it's something that can be a little bit missing these days.
Yes.
It's something that like was very attractive about the early church that outsiders looked on and they saw like, man, these people take care of each other. Like, I want to be a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember as we were doing exegesis for that weekend when it really clicked, because there was a moment that I even asked our team, like, this sounds like a country club if we're just taking care of ourselves, and then to add fullness to it, times of persecution and being able to stand with each other. And it's not that we only serve believers, but there is something really special that happens within the community of God's people. Yeah. And then, as you just said, it spills out from that. People notice what we have as believers, and then it spills out because we do love people. And so that was a really, really special journey to work through that text. And it became so much richer even than what I was expecting going into it.
Right.
Like this is one of those hallmark serve other people kind of passages. And yet it really took on that special meaning of what we get to offer each other as believers.
I also love as we were processing through it, thinking about just his audience and stuff there, it's like there was also the piece of just Jesus identifying with his followers and saying like, hey, just so you know, like whenever they reject you, they're actually rejecting me. Like those kinds of pieces that were just, I don't know, I loved what it stirred in me about my relationship with Jesus and my relationship to the rest of the body. It was just, it like framed it a little differently for me, not just, hey, figure out where you can do acts of charity and, drop $1 here and do the, go ahead and have them put your tip for the children's hospital or whatever. It's like, it's not just that. Like there's a special kind of love that we have for one another.
There really is. Well said. Well said. Which takes us to the fourth and final week, which was in Romans 12. And what an incredible passage. When you look at Romans and you see those first 11 chapters, just so rich in theology. And then beginning in chapter 12, we get the application of right theology. And this passage was right in the middle of that. And this was one that we were really blessed to have Nick Volkenine step in and preach this sermon. So I didn't have the privilege of doing that. So jump in as we were doing exegesis, as the team did. What stood out to you?
Yeah. So I think, in that passage, you've got all the, don't be slothful in zeal, but be fervent. And I loved that because it gives a little bit of like characteristic of like, what is our service supposed to be like? It's not just supposed to be reluctant. We do it because we gotta, but it's like, we should do it with being fervent. We should do it like not being slothful. We should be zealous to serve one another. I love that. And then there's this piece of like rejoicing with those who rejoice, weeping with those who weep. And I think that's a really unique way to think about serving as well. It's like whenever I enter into a space with someone, and we've talked about that like emotional attunement, like that whenever someone is rejoicing, just entering into that emotional space with them. Yes. Whenever someone's weeping, entering into that place of sorrow with them. And that's a way of serving others. And so I think that's interesting because it's not just the cup of cold water, but it's also like, how are we there for one another in the highs and lows of life? Yes. So I love that. And then he had something, it was funny after the weekend, I was talking with you, Michael.
Yes, we were.
I'm like, man, somebody I heard recently say like, what would Southern Illinois be like if every one of us kept an open chair at their dining room table? Yes. I'm like, who was that? And then I heard Nick preach it again on Sunday. I'm like, it was Nick. Nick was the one who said it. Yes. And I just found that to be so inspiring to think about. And it's also like, it's super countercultural for us to think about using our homes in that way because people don't really do that as much anymore. Have people into their houses to share a meal together. But I'm like, whenever we think about serving, it's like, man, what would our church be like? And then how would that spill over into our community if we started leaving an extra chair at the dining room table to be able to invite people over to serve them, even in the way that we serve them a meal and practice this community.
It's already neat to see how these practices skills of our relationship with others, serving others and being connected to others, we're seeing an overlap in those in the most beautiful of ways. And another phrase from that passage that has continued to show up in our conversations is this outdoing one another in honor, like genuinely seeking to honor those in our lives, serving them, sharing a meal in community with them, and giving them honor. It's a theme that continues to rise to the top as we engage this rule of life, as we engage these practices, skills that relate to our relationship with others. So yes, what an incredible passage. So what was your favorite one? And you're on thin ice if you pick Nick's weekend. Man, just saying.
It was Nick's. No, I'm just kidding. I think I had different favorite moments from each of them. Yes. Probably if I had to pick one, week 2 with Isaiah was the one that like hit me between the eyes the most. Yes. I don't know, like there was something about just seeing his willingness before he even knew what the mission was going to be, and then and after he knew that the mission was going to be unfruitful, that he just had like the grit and the servant's heart to say, send me. That was like inspiring for me. Yes. Yes. So that was probably my favorite. Second favorite was Nick's though.
Absolutely. So thankful to have him on our team and serving in our church. So with that, I would say the one that was maybe most fun for me was the whole discussion of Abraham and what if Sarai is Iscah and what oh my goodness, what if she was his niece, and what if he knew she was barren and he was the one that chose to take her, and so it was a mind bender, like, oh my goodness, what if that is true? And then I think for me, that Matthew 25 passage, like, serving doesn't make us sheep, but it's what sheep do. And then that, it really hit me in clarifying between, hey, serving the least of these isn't, some of the illustrations you already gave, just round up a tip or stop and give someone who's, waiting and asking for money. Those overflow out of this genuineness serving of the community of God's people, that there's something really special that we share. And then as we share that with each other, it just overflows into all aspects of life. So that was really special. So as our church processed this month together, any stories that came up for you? I know maybe the most noticeable story was then the next week having the missions fair, and just heard many comments. Oh man, Keith and Kayla did such a great job, and with the whole team setting up and so many ministries involved. I've heard several did and are getting involved, and just really excited about finding opportunities to serve. How about you? Any other ones that rose to the top?
This is not a story as much as it is just like observations of our church body that like make me really proud to be a part of it and stuff. It's like, so there's the missions fair side of it, but then there's also the, and not minimizing that at all, but I started noticing the way people were using their gifts just in like one-on-one interactions. So it's like, I was thinking about, I just started paying attention to people who are like, gifted by God to be encouragers. Who are just entering into conversations and just like, as they're sensing that like, there's something unique about the way God wants me to serve in this space. They were just using their gift of encouragement, or people who are engaging conversations with, like to show hospitality to people who are coming in, or to show that like they cared about someone, entering into a space of like weeping with those who weep. And it's just like paying attention to all those little ways that our church family was serving each other was like really refreshing to me.
What I see is that intentionality from our prayer team spreading. Where you do see exactly the kind of conversations you just described, people walking across the room and praying for and checking on, having those genuine conversations to serve another person, not just waiting for the church, the institution to take care of that person's need, but to be the activated church going across the room. And so, yes, I had Corey talking about his engagement with the worship team. I had Diane talking about being in Chipmunks. I remember Dustin just being so encouraged by seeing an army of retirees when we were here doing the food distribution. And so some of those you would be like, oh, that's a position at church where you volunteer to do that. Yes. And then as you described, people are engaging that in a real and life-giving way that is extending beyond a position, beyond, I took my volunteer slot, where there is real ministry happening, people finding that beautiful fulfillment of serving the Lord in that way. And it is noticeable. It is absolutely noticeable. How about for your personal experience? Anything else to add to that from you?
So there was something that like kind of a switch that flipped a little bit for me as well, just in like the way I think about serving our body, that on the weekends, I found myself just more in tune with like asking the Spirit of God to like point me where he wanted me to go and like point out conversations. And it was just amazing to see. So this is where I like, I found myself in conversations that I just really sensed the Lord was using me in like, honestly, like pretty small ways to serve in a way that was like, the emotional equivalent of that cup of cold water.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found that, and it's stuff where it's like my brain naturally wants to try to systematize everything and put everything into like, let's create a standard operating procedure for each volunteer position and make sure that it just happens. And I just felt like I could sense the Lord like animating his body, like putting people in the right places at the right times to have those conversations. And so like that was really refreshing for me to just say like, okay, God, here am I, send me.
Yes.
What do you want to do with me this weekend?
Yes.
And it was fun. There were a couple of times like that where I was in the room during worship, praying for somebody or praying for our people, and God would like kind of highlight somebody to me. It's like, okay, I want to talk with them. And it was funny twice during this series. I'm like, I want to talk with them. And like by the time service was over, I went to go talk with them, and somebody else had already stepped in and was like praying for them.
Yes.
And I was just reminded like, I'm a part of the body of Christ.
That's right.
That like God is using this body to build itself up in love. So that was big for me.
Yes. And I remember very shortly after those encounters happened and seeing your face light up and seeing that really special thing that God was doing in you, through you, and in and through our church to see what he was doing. For me, as we took this journey that month, a couple things clicked. 2 Verge questions came to life. You know, have you been honoring, understanding, and generous? It really took on that serve aspect. Okay, wow, have I been seizing those opportunities? And then another Verge question, have you damaged another person either behind their back or to their face? It's like, hey, I can't be serving other people if I'm talking bad about them or down on them. Have that attitude. And so Verge has been a really special part of my life and my journey, and a couple of those questions really took on new life as we put the highlight on being able to serve others. And in multiple conversations, the other piece that came to life for me were people really pursuing, how do I do ministry at work? Or how do I do ministry where God has positioned me through the week? Yes, we get to come together and as the gathered church do ministry with and for each other and be sent out on some really special ministry teams, mission stuff. And then how do we engage on a daily basis in the place where God has me? And just had some really neat conversations with some of our people pursuing that. Struggling with it at times. It's like, how do I engage ministry in the place where I spend most of my week in being at work? And so this month has been just such a pleasure to engage that awareness of service, to develop that gift, that skill, that ability, and that commitment to say, yes, we are going to be a people where our rule of life reflects that we serve others. What a great week, and what a great moment to stop and put it in the vault to say, yes, this was our experience. So Nathan, thanks for being here today as we celebrate a rule of life that we serve others.